City News everywhere.
The opportunity and compassion is what people need in order to, succeed, to stabilize.
More people are experiencing homelessness in Winnipeg now than before the pandemic. That's according to a new report showing the impacts of lockdowns and social distancing on already marginalized communities. Resource Assistance for Youth, or RAY, is a street-level nonprofit that serves youth living on the streets. During the early days of the pandemic, their street teams faced a huge demand for services, prompting the study of how the pandemic was impacting youth experiencing homelessness.
There was a huge demand for services and supports to be accessible outside of buildings. So many things were shutting down, and people were, kind of starkly and unexpectedly cut off from a lot of the supports that they usually require.
Comparing data from the year before the pandemic to the year during the pandemic, RAY saw a jump of 2,200 new people needing services. That's compared to 1,400 the year prior, pointing to an increase in visible homelessness. And many of those first-time unsheltered contacts were Indigenous people, particularly women. Voster says drug use patterns also changed.
And what we found is that a lot of people kind of moved away from methamphetamines because there was a decrease in the supply of it, and then towards opioids, which creates a lot of risk for folks who rely on substances.
The report says long-term housing appears to be the most important factor in whether or not a person will use substances. But the pandemic reduced people's abilities to couch surf or even stay in shelters because of limited capacity, forcing many to live in encampments or on the street. Voster says this data shows a lack of preparedness to having an influx of people on the streets.
We need to be a lot more proactive rather than reactive with, especially with youth and young people who, don't have a lot of service options, don't have a lot of housing options, especially if they don't have a rental history, if they're, they don't have somebody who can act as a guarantor. It's really difficult for them to find places to live and stay, and we need to be able to provide as a society greater options for folks.
Voster says government investments in affordable housing options would be helpful, but changing the perception of people experiencing homelessness would go a long way.
Nobody chooses to be on the street. And it's not their fault that they're on the street. Being compassionate and kind to folks who are experiencing precarious housing or homelessness is huge.
In Winnipeg, Marie Gomez, City News.